across each. That's really a big part of its goal, to give consistency across different ecosystems so that tools that don't have stacks. OSV itself being open. We then have OSV.dev. I tend to think of this a bit as the back end, even though it's got a front end component to it, a web component, but in a nutshell, it's a giant data web. There are various database sources of advisories. They get checked out, ingested dev. That involves doing having these workers run in the background. They do normalization, aliasing, deduplication, and in particular they do commit enumeration and version enumeration, which is really, frankly, it's really expensive, so it's really great that someone else does it for you. And then it exposes all that through an API, so you can provide either a Git shard or a package ecosystem and a name and a version, and OSV Dev will tell you what security advisories are affected or what that thing is affected by. We then have OSV Scanner, that's our CLI component. To me, sort of the front end, that really has sort of 3 layers to it, high-level layers. We have the CLI itself, which then wraps Scanner, the library, which is effectively a high-level way of configuring Scalable, which I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, so what that does is you provide it with a target, you provide it with a container image or a directory like your code base or an individual file, and then it will extract as much information as possible from that thing about package information and various other stuff. And then it will use services like OSV Dev to enrich that with data like what security advisories are relevant here, and does other things like license checking as well, which is quite cool. And as I said, this is sort of a high-level wrapper for Scalable, which is kind of the library side of things. So a lot of the extracting and the enriching stuff is done, it's all built on this big plugin system. So that all lives in Scalable. So we have plugins, we have extractor plugins, so that extracts package information from things like packagelocks.json, composerlock.json. There's talks of a Drupal modules extractor, which would effectively look for vendored modules. It would go through directories and open your info.yamls and pull out the versions there, stuff like that. Those are extractors. We have enrichers that they take the information from extractors and they enrich it with more data. So that's stuff like your vulnerability lookups and your license lookups. And then there are other types like detectors and annotators and various other things, and that all lives in Scalable. So these are Go libraries, or most of them are in Go. OSV Dev's technically in Python, but they're migrated to Go. It's a whole thing. They're backed by Google, and they're all open source. I personally tend to spend most of my time when I'm in the OSV ecosystem on Scanner and Scalable, but I have worked across all of these, and I'm sort of involved in them generally from day to day. So meanwhile at Ackama, we started life, as I think a lot of web agencies do, with focus on one stack. For us, it was Ruby on Rails. That was like 15 to 20 years ago, 16 years ago, there you go. And we've grown since then. We've got multiple stacks now. We've got the big 4 on my list of Python, PHP, JavaScript, and Ruby. And security for us has been a big focus from day one. So we've had developers doing manual reviews, manual security checks, stuff like that, training, various things. We've used automated tools. We've got them baked into CLI. We've had security analyzer, static analysis, dependency scanning, and then we've had things like what's here, Bundle Auditor, which is an internal application we've had pretty much from day one. It runs every day, clones all of our code bases, runs various checks on them, and then puts the results into Slack for our security team to review. And this gives us a nice, layered approach to security. And so this was Bundle Auditor 5 years ago. We effectively had a tool per stack, right? This was frustrating because, as I said, this is Bundle Auditor here, but it also applies to developer experience, to CIs, to all that stuff. So every stack had its own tool. You had to remember how to use that tool. They all had their own different opinions. Some tools it was -- format equals JSON, other it's -- JSON, other it's -- output JSON. It's a pain, especially for someone like me. As I'm going where I'm needed, I'm having to jump between stack and having to remember, I'm in Python today, so manageable but frustrating. And frankly, Drupal was one of the worst in this case because we were having to use Drush PM security at the time, and I didn't go back to explicitly check. I think it did get better near the end, but at the time, at least initially, it would just give us an exit code and a list of packages, and we would have to go manually cross-reference that with like the RSS feeds and the Drupal security pages and stuff to actually figure out what the vulnerability was, how we address it, stuff like that. So looking for ways to simplify this is what led me to enter the OSV ecosystem. At the time when I first started, the OSV team themselves, they were very focused on OSV dev. So the scanner was reasonably underdeveloped. Thankfully, I am a developer. And so I naturally went and started to work on my own fork of the scanner to see if I could bring it up to speed with the functionality that Ackama needed. And that was something that we achieved. That was pretty cool. And so we rolled that out internally and yeah, started using it there. However, as previously mentioned, I am a developer. I do open source. I did not stop there. I continued to add to our fork of the scanner. And that eventually caught the eye of the OSV team, who sort of shoulder tapped me and said, frankly, they were like, the work that you are doing is pretty much what we want in the scanner. Once we're done with OSV dev, how would you like to work together and start like bringing that functionality through? And I was like, that's really cool. It's a really cool alignment of various things, and jumped on that. And we've been working together now for about 3-4 years, and it's been a really cool relationship. So this is what bundle auditor looked like after we had adopted OSV Scanner, and this applies as well to our developer experience and our CI. I think the GitHub Actions workflow we use is like 10 lines long now. It runs in 1 minute. You can copy and paste it into anything. And, you just go, I want to check this thing for security stuff. You just run OSV Scanner. It's one liner, and for your CIs, you just copy and paste those 10 lines, and away you go. But for Drupal, we were still having to do our manual checks because the advisories for Drupal weren't available in OSV dev. So after working with the team for a bit, I got a sense of what is required to get advisories into the OSV dev data warehouse. The best way to do that really is with Git repository. We use the term database because we like to sound fancy, but it's generally always a Git repository. So the idea is that you have your repository, you put your advisories in it as JSON somewhere or as YAML, and then you point OSV dev at it. And if you put the advisory database, the repository, on a place like GitHub or GitLab as an open source thing, then you get like infinite scalability, and OSV dev can pull as much as it wants. You get things like issue queues and pull requests. You usually get a really good allotment of CI minutes, either for cheap or for free, which is really beneficial in this case. And so it's a really low barrier to entry for making an advisory database like this. And that's what I set out to do for Drupal, for their advisories. However, since the canonical home for advisories for Drupal is Drupal.org, our database has a bit of a different setup than most, where it has to go through this process of fetching the advisories from the canonical space, converting them into the OSV format, and then publishing them into the database, where they can then be later ingested by OSV dev. So has anyone here actually used the Drupal.org REST API? Do you use it frequently, or once or twice?
I use it when I have to, and it makes me sad.
Well, fair enough. Interesting hot take. Okay. Good to know. Tell your local congressman. But yeah, so that's what we're using. Drupal, unsurprisingly, Drupal.org is built on top of Drupal. It has the RESTful Web Services module available, and that slide is coming out really horribly on this projector.
It's code, we believe you.
Yeah, it's code. So look, I'm a developer. There's technically code in this talk. It's technically relevant. But yeah, security advisories are a custom content type. And so even if you do not like the API, it at least gives you a consistent paginated way of retrieving advisories. I was able to request all advisories. I continue to be able to request all advisories from the API, ordered from most recently modified downwards, and then I'm able to go through that list and just bail out when I reach an advisory that we've already ingested into our database, which is a fantastic optimization to have. After having the advisories in their bespoke content type format, moving on to converting them. This is a pretty straightforward process. I don't think there's a lot of surprises here. It's mostly just mapping fields from one field to another and doing some very unsurprising, very common transformations, mainly like time zones and time stamps and fields that are strings in one place and should be arrays in OSV and sort of wrapping it in there. This affected one here is the real interesting one. So at the heart, the affected field in OSVs is the heart of the advisory, despite the fact that it is technically optional. To have a valid OSV advisory, you need an ID and a publish date, and then nothing else, technically. But the affected field is really the heart of it, because it's how tools can determine whether the advisory affects the thing that the version of the package that you have. So it has a package, it has a name and an ecosystem, it's then got a series of ranges which have a series of events, and the events are commonly introduced and fixed. It's technically a few more fields, there's some other stuff, but like most of that is just additive. This is still the core. You won't see any like wildly different stuff to this advisory example here. So on the Drupal side, this is interesting because we have the field affected version property on the security advisories, which is what tells us what's affected by the advisory, and that's a composer version range or constraint. So I ended up having to write a custom parser to figure out the upper and lower bounds of that version constraint, and then turn it into the introduce and fit event that you can see on the other side here.
Are you open for questions, or you do questions at the end?
I'll do questions at the end.
Okay.
So with all that in place, with the converting, the fetching and converting, publishing was a pretty straightforward GitHub Actions workflow. It runs on schedule. We can also run on demand, so that when we know that an advisory has changed, we can just manually kick it off. And it literally just goes through what I've just talked about. It clones the database, clones the repository, that sets up dependencies, it runs the scripts, and then it commits the results to a branch, pushes that branch up in a pull request. And that's all done automatically. So us maintainers get this nice pull request going like, beep boop, the advisories have changed, and we go, cool, we'll review that and generally merge it, or do any changes that we need to response. So we got this in place near the end of 2025. This was sort of October to December kind of period, and once we had the database in place, we started using it internally. We put a particular focus to start with on doing our manual process in parallel to using the more automated database in order to ensure that the data the results we were getting were correct. And once we were feeling pretty confident with that, we moved on to working with the OSV and the Drupal security teams to get the database made official and into the wider community and ingested into OSV dev. So on the OSV side, this required two primary changes to the OSV specification. The first is the database prefix, which every database needs to have. They have an official database prefix. For us, we just went with Drupal, plain and simple. The other thing that we needed was to figure out the ecosystem. As in OSV, the ecosystem represents the canonical home for advisories. So in the packages ecosystem, that represents packages that live in packages.org. And Drupal modules do not live there, most of them. They live in the packages.drupal.org/admin/separate repositories. So the way we addressed this was to modify the packages ecosystem to take an optional suffix. The default value for that suffix being packages.org. The suffix represented the repository as you would give it to Composer for where the package lived. And so the default was, as you can see, we have packages.org as our default. That means that existing advisories don't need to be changed. And then for like Drupal, we just suffix on the end the Drupal package on there. And the really cool thing about this is it's agnostic. It's motivated by Drupal, but it is not specific to Drupal. So places like WPackages, which hosts WordPress modules and plugins and themes, they can also now use this to do advisories in the OSV format that they can be interested in as well, which is a really cool benefit to this work as well. And so once we had that in place, we then rehomed the database from the Ackama GitHub into the Drupal security team's GitHub. So we're still primary maintainers and very actively involved in that, but it now officially lives with the Drupal security team. And that was completed around December 2025, and so we started having these advisories ingested into OSV Dev December 2025, I think December 10th sort of thing. So I have an example here of the scanner in action. We can see we have some packages advisories here, some of these are from packages.org, and then we have some Drupal modules as well. These ones prefixed with Drupal. These are coming from our database, so these are Drupal modules. As a result of having these advisories ingested into OSV Dev, which is quite cool. This is the same scan again, just with our vertical output, just to show we have the difference. I feel like I should also note, this is a Composer lock I pulled from like a year or two ago. Everything has long since been patched here. None of these are actually vulnerabilities in live. But this isn't quite where our journey ends. So we have a few, we've got several different ideas on what we can do going ahead. A lot of them related to Drupal.org and helping the security team to reduce the amount of work that they do. But right now, one of the cool things that we're focusing on is with automatic dependency updating tools. So popular examples are Renovate and Dependabot. For those that don't know, these are tools for updating vulnerabilities, updating packages, but they're really configurable. You can have them do pull requests automatically for like grouping things. You can have like linting tools pull request and a production tools pull request. You can have them do like an individual pull request for each major version. You can do all kinds of things. And one of those things is to do a pull request for security updates. And that is powered through OSV. So Renovate use OSV dev directly. Dependabot use the GitHub Advisory database, which is published in the OSV format and ingested into OSV. So we're working with GitHub to modify Dependabot to support the optional suffix in packages to start ingesting our database. Renovate has the same change being made, but someone actually beat us to it, which was really awesome to see. Someone else in the community saw the Drupal advisory database, was using it, and saw that Renovate, which they were also using, wasn't working with it, and they reached out, and I think that's pretty much done, which was a really cool bonus. But again, the exciting thing with this is that the majority of the work being done here is about supporting the optional suffix that we've made in the OSV format, motivated by Drupal, but not Drupal specific. So once it's done, it'll also mean places like W packages, if they were to start publishing advisories using this, they should have a lot easier time being ingested as well, which is really cool. So just want to give a thanks to a bunch of people here. These could not have been done without people involved. This is a public talk, so there's probably at least one other person that I've forgotten off the slide. They're welcome to reach out. I will add them to the slide, but yeah, big shout out to the Drupal security team, the OSV team in particular. And these are just some references when we publish the slide deck of various things that I've talked about and referenced so that you can look them up later. And that we arrive at questions.
Yeah. So with so you said you're parsing the composer constraints to get the introduced and fixed in versions.
Yeah.
And the problem that we've had with the OSV format and many other different formats that are proposed is that we often don't know when the bug was introduced, and sometimes it might have existed for 20 years and been introduced in Drupal 6. Sometimes it's very, very rare that we actually know when something actually regressed or if it's just been around for a decade plus. So the issue that we have currently is that core has at least 4 branches supported at a time, right? So when I create a security advisory for whatever, I will be tagging releases currently in 11.3, 11.2, 10.6, and 10.5, right? So all 4 of those branches are in parallel. Is that introduced in and fixed in multi-value? So that, for example, so 10.3, say 11.3.8 is secure, right? But it has the exact same security updates as, say, 11.2.9, and the same security updates as 10.11 and 10.6.11 and 10.5.12 or something. So how do you deal with that part of it when it's only introduced and fixed and it treats it as one line? Do you follow what I'm saying?
I think I do. I mean, the answer is just we parse them all. We parse the whole thing, and then we generate multiple ranges and events for that. I just open up.
Because we've had issues before with like people's scanners saying that their updated version is insecure when it's actually not. So I'd be curious to see how those.
Sorry, somehow maybe I can put this on the screen. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're reliant on the data that's present in the Drupal advisory.
And the component constraint can give you that richness, but it didn't look like that format would.
Yeah. So let me find core, and we can have a look at one of the advisories. So I will have to find my mouse, and then I'll have to have a little stab because I don't know which of these have multiple ranges. Yeah, so this one does. So what we do is, so this is the original, we store this as metadata.
So it does accept the composer style piped constraints?
Yeah, so OSV does not. This is, the database specific is just, there's a bunch of these around in the spec. This allows us to, so I chose to put the data there for reference for exactly these kind of things, so we can by side. So this is effectively the input. And then what we've built is a custom parser, but like this is just a completely valid composer version range, and in this case it's actually really easy because each of these are their own part of the constraint, and we just split on there, and then we can parse them all separately, and then that gives us the result. And in the advisory land, we can have multiple affected. You can have multiple affected entries, you can have multiple ranges, you can technically have multiple events, but it's more common that that's used as just a pair of introduced and fixed. But so you can see here, again, using that system, this was broken up. We did a split on the double pipe, and then this one was this part of the constraint, and that gives us our introduced and our fixed there. And then we have the previous part here, which gave us this range here, and so on. And then when security tools are using this, they iterate through that and they're, okay, well, we're introduced, okay, are we higher than version 8 or are we equal to or higher than 8.0? And if so, continue. We found fits, we stop now, and if we're between those two ranges, we're vulnerable. If we're not, and then we move on to the next one and sort of rinse and repeat.
So it's multi-value, and you're assuming, in the lack of better information, that it was introduced in the zero release of every major, basically. Which is, I mean, like,
yeah.
For purpose.
Well, yeah, I mean, in our case, we're going by what you've told us. So this advisory does not specify from the start of time, so we don't in here. But yes, that's the common. And that is, I think, what's recommended. If you are unsure, just say that everything before that, and then you amend the advisory. And that's one of the reasons as well for having like a GitHub. I mean, the Drupal advisory source is a perfectly source, but it's one of the advantages of having a Git-based thing is people can open an issue, do a pull request, and it makes it really easy to modify. Possibly related, because I didn't actually end up putting it in, even though I'm really happy with it because of time, so I might just show this off too. Like, we have a patches system, so we can actually amend advisories, and we have this for a number, and we've posted them, if I can just figure out why my cursor has been silly. We've posted these upstream for amendment. Most of these are in old advisories, but our scripts allow us to patch advisories. So if in that case someone came to us and said, oh, like I can definitely prove, we could patch the OSV advisory immediately and then feed it up to the Drupal security team to get it patched at the canonical source as well. And that just helps reduce that time to, what do you call it, like time to having the fix out there sort of thing. Which is, yeah, a really cool side product of this.
About 5 more minutes. With what you've done here, so you don't have to worry about that Drush being security anymore?
Nope, I just run OSV scanner and it tells me to stop. So we do have bundle auditor. That is now using just OSV scanner. It's no longer using Drush PM security. Yeah, exactly. So like I said, the bundle auditor was just, frankly, it was a really good slide of showing the simplicity gain if we drop the thing. Bundle auditor runs in parallel to our other security practices. So the idea, and a big part of that idea is with advisories and whatnot, like we have project work and you have work going delivered, and you'll have things like cabs where you'll schedule a deployment, and then you'll get like a security vulnerability, it'll pop up, and it'll be like, oh yeah, that's not exploitable, but our CI system to fail. So the project team may decide at the time that they're going to ignore the advisory deployment out and come back to it. And so by having services like Bundle Auditor run and reporting to a team, we have this team that can, they have a completely different, someone at the repo level deciding to ignore an advisory does not automatically for the security team. And so we can do our own evaluation, and we also get a good reminder to patch it. And that's also built into Bundle Auditor every Wednesday. It actually ignores our ignores so that we don't get complacent and forget. Like, we can't just ignore everything forever. And so, yeah, our Wednesdays get a pretty big message.
Actually, the first is a comment. So if you ever have a constraint that's wrong, just say something in the security-team channel in Drupal Slack, and one of us can fix it. It's instant.
I have opened an issue. I opened an issue a couple of months ago.
Oh yeah, don't. I mean, you can do that, but it's probably just faster to send a message in the Slack because it's just a UI field for us.
Yep. No, I will absolutely. I will signal that back in as well to get picked up. So I've worked with Greg on a lot of this, and so I think that was but I don't know what it requirements are.
Yeah, the reason I suggest that is to scale beyond Greg.
Yeah, definitely.
There's 30 of these, person.
Yeah.
He has so many other responsibilities, like he mentors the new provisional people and everything. So then the second question that I had is also correlated. So when we have dependency, so there's two kinds of dependencies for core, right? There are dependencies that are just brought in by Composer or whatever, and we change the constraints of them, and if we don't increase the package version, like if core isn't vulnerable, we don't actually really need to increase the version of the lock file, but people's scanners yell at them, so as a courtesy, we'll update the version in Composer lock for whatever dependency. But for JavaScript, a lot of those dependencies are repackaged in the vendor folder because we're not expecting people to be running Node necessarily. And then there's like rebuilt assets in it. So I guess the question is there, we've run into problems with some tools, some scanners, where people's development workflows actually don't allow them to install Drupal because they say that it's an insecure version of Drupal because it happens to have an insecure version of whatever package in either the yarn lock or the Composer lock file. Have you ever encountered that problem with this tool? And if so, I would like to know more about it.
Well, generally not, because if I understand you correctly there, like the yarn, you're saying you're shipping a version of Drupal that has a yarn lock in it. The yarn lock, we don't scan that because that's a vendored thing, and we don't scan the vendor packages like that because the whole point is we're pulling them from disk and we're only scanning the things we use. And frankly, the yarn locks and stuff in that case, they're completely irrelevant because like the yarn lock that matters is the one that's there. Yeah.
Because there are other scanners where it's like they can't update to the secure version of Drupal because it happens to have a vulnerability in some random thing that core doesn't actually expose.
Yeah. What we've had that come up. We've actually been dealing with that a little bit recently with libraries where we've inherited, I think, a few. Basically, we tend to avoid like vendoring them code base. We leave package managers. It's only in the cases of committing. And the main two times we've done that is with WordPress sites, just because we tend to use Drupal for big CMS stuff. WordPress we tend to use at times for like social goods and small sites like that. And so the setup there doesn't Composer, so we tend to vendor the modules there. And so occasionally they have the plugins, and occasionally have blocks. We just delete them. Libraries is the other one where we've inherited a few applications that have committed their libraries, and for there we work to undo that, to have the libraries pulled in as part of the build system and done through that mechanism, so again they're no longer present on the disk. But yeah, ultimately, ideally the log file shouldn't be shipped when they're not actually being used as view there. Any other questions?
Does OSV scanner support serif export?
Yes. I say that tentatively because SBOMs are not my specialty, but it definitely does support stuff like that. There's Cyclone X in. There is the other one that I can't remember I don't think it's serif, but it begins with S. XBD. But yeah, SBOMs and whatnot are very, very important part of that. So it supports both scanning and outputting as well.